All right, today we're going to take some notes on some different types of functions when y is a function of x. So that means the x goes into the function machine. You do all of that work in the function machine and out spits the y. For these notes, you're definitely going to need a ruler, and I would also suggest that you have a couple different colors so that when you're making notes to yourself, you can kind of see where the notes are. We're going to start off our notes by picking some values for x here. And then we're going to take these x's, and we're going to plug them into this machine. We're going to do this work, and it's going to spit out a y value. The values that I'm going to pick for x are -1 to 1. The integer is -1 to 1. You can pick any numbers you want, but if you pick 1,000,000, it's not going to fit on this graph here. So you got to be kind of smart about the numbers that you're going to pick. Okay, so when we take -1, we're going to plug it in for x. So that means 2 times x, which now becomes 2 times -1. And then we're going to add 4. So order of operations, multiply first, gets us -2 plus 4, which is a +2. And I'm going to make a fourth column here. It's the xy column. My x value is a -1, and my y value was a 2. That way it's a little easier when I plot my ordered pairs. Okay, so now I'm going to stick in 0. Remember, you can always pause the video at any time if I'm writing too fast. 0 plus 4, because anything times 0 is 0. 0 plus 4 is 4, so I have the point 0, 4. 2 times 1 plus 4 becomes 2 plus 4, which is 6. And hopefully you're starting to notice a little bit of a pattern. 2 times 1 plus 4, or sorry, 2 times 2 went in, plus 4, equals 4 plus 4, which is 8. So that's 2, 8. All right, so let's take a step back and see if we notice a pattern. We should notice a pattern. I purposely made a pattern in my x values. I went up by 1 each time in my x values. So that will make there be a pattern in my y values. And notice what's happening in y? They're going up by 2 each time. Okay? And kind of look at our equation here. Do you notice anything that kind of makes the same kind of sense? We're going up by 2. Look at your equation. Okay, so let's plot those points out. So we're starting at the origin. We go left 1 because it's -1 and up to 2. Then we have 0, 4, 1, 6, and 2, 8. Then we're going to use a ruler to make our line, and we don't make an itty-bitty line. We make a line that goes across the entire coordinate plane. And these were just 4 solutions, remember. There were 4 numbers that worked, but all of the numbers on the line work. So we have arrows going on because it can go on forever if our paper went on forever. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to make some observations. So some things that I noticed, first of all, was this pattern in the table. I noticed as x went up by 1, as x goes up by 1, y went up by 2. That was one pattern that I noticed. Then I'm going to look at the line and see if I notice anything about the line. And I'm going to say that this line is steep. If you had to go up this hill, boy, it would be steep. Now, the way we determine if something is steep or not steep is if it is steeper than a 45-degree angle. So a 45-degree angle would be like this. This is definitely steeper than a 45-degree angle. Something not as steep as a 45 would be like this, and we would say it's not steep. We also can observe that this line goes up. And you look at lines as if you were reading a book from left to right. So as I go left to right, it goes up. You'll also notice I'm doing the vertical line test right now. This is a function. It passes the vertical line test. Each input has a unique output. The last observation I want to make is where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses the y-axis at 4. Or we could write it as its ordered pair, 0, 4. So those are kind of the observations we're looking for. All right, so what you're going to do right now is you're going to pause the video. You're going to go down to this next example here. You'll notice the equations are very closely related. It's almost the same, except I stuck a negative in front of this too. You're going to do all the work, make the table, draw the graph, and make the observations, and then unpause and see if you are matching to the answer key that I'm going to have up here. Okay? All right, so you should have just unpaused. And here's the answer key now. So what happened? I used the same numbers for x. If you pick different numbers, you still should have the same graph. I went up by 1, and the y values went down by 2 this time. And look at what was different, that negative sign there. That one didn't have a negative sign. The values that you should have gotten, your ordered pairs, would have been negative 1, 6, 0, 4, 1, 2, and 2, 0. It still crosses the y-axis, at 4. Well, look at the two equations. What do you notice about the two equations and that they both crossed at 4? The only difference in these two is that this one went up and this one went down. And what's different about the two equations? Okay, so you have all of those descriptions in there, and we're going to move on to the last example right now. So the last example down below, by the way, if you were having trouble getting this, see Mrs. Wyman right now, and she can help you through this if you were having trouble getting those. Okay, so we're going down to the last example here, and you're going to notice this one does not look linear like the others. These were in y equals mx plus b form. You may have talked about that last year a little teeny bit. This one has something different. There's a squared there. So we're going to stick these values that are already in our table in for x. So that means we're going to do x squared, which is negative 2 squared, which is negative 2 times negative 2. And a negative times negative is a positive. So that's a positive 4. So I'm going to make my last column here. That point would be negative 2, 4. Okay, now if you stick this in your graphing calculator without the parentheses, it will tell you the answer is negative 4. But it's not. But it's squaring it and then sticking the negative in front because it's doing order of operations. And squared comes before multiplying by a negative. So make sure you have the parentheses in there, or you just write it out this way. So negative 1 squared equals negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. So that's negative 1, 1. Anything times 0 is 0, so I'm not even going to bother with the 0 times 0. I know I have 0 here. 1 squared, you don't need the parentheses, or you can have them. It's 1 times 1. There's no negative sign, so we don't have to worry about that. So that's 1, 1. And 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. So that's 2, 4. So go ahead and plot those out. It's going to look a little different this time. Negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 1, 1, 0, 0. And then we're going back up all of a sudden. Look at this. All right, so here's what this graph actually looks like. I'm going to use a little bit brighter color here to make sure that it shows up. You're not going to use your ruler this time. You're going to draw a nice smooth curve, and then it kind of rounds out and then heads back up again. That's what this graph looks like. And that graph is called a parabola. P-A-R-A-B-O-L-A. Parabola. And we're going to do some more work with parabolas. It's still a function. It passes the vertical line test. But it's definitely not linear. It's not a line. The only other thing we could say about our description here is where it crosses the y-axis. It crosses at the origin. It never went down into the negative values because you were squaring everything. And a negative times a negative is a positive. So that's how we ended up with that positive value. Okay, so those were 3 practice problems. And so you're going to do 3 practice problems on your own. So you're actually going to skip the next page of notes for a minute. That's going to be the next section. And you're going to go on to page 17 where it says practice at the top. And there are 3 just like this. Okay, just like what we just did. This one has a plus 2 on it. Notice that. So after you square it, you're going to add 2. Okay, so after you're done with that, you're going to check it with the key and then check it in with Mrs. Weinman. And just feel free to see me if you have any questions. Get going. Good job.